personally ambitious, really just interested in his own power that is going to be used to wipe out these evil Baal worshippers that have taken up a place of real influence in the land of Israel. Then Jehu gathered all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little. Jehu will serve him much. And now summon all of the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers and all his priests, and let no one be missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it in cunning in order that he might destroy the worshippers of Baal. It is just as ruthless and in destroying Baal. He had used all of them dark, underhanded methods with Jezebel to try to destroy the worshippers of Jehovah. It's up to punishing evildoers. He uses Jehu for that purpose. And he lies to them and tells them he wants the kings before him. So all the Baal come to the temple. He said, sanctify a solemn, and they proclaimed who about Israel came, so that there was death. And when the house of Baal was in, must have a symbol there. We know of Dagon, death over killed in his church. The courtyards were built with lots of people. So a great multitude to carry out this worship. It's all under cunning. Said to one who was in charge of the wardrobe, garments for all the worshippers of Baal, garments for them. They are all dressed up in their Baal worshiping holy garments that they wear to worship. Everybody's identified as being someone loyal to Baal, and then they went in to offer sacrifices. Now, Jehu himself 80 men outside. One who permits any of them bring into your hands to make sure anybody should be put to death with your life if you let any get away. Guards stationed at the door. About finished offering the burnt offering. Some scholars think Jehu himself offered a sacrifice. It's just all on board, or maybe you just offered offerings from the king at least. Then Jehu said to the guards and to the royal officials, go in, kill them. Let none come out. And they killed them with the edge of the sword. And the guard and the royal officers threw them out and went to the inner room of the house of Baal. So they go in and slaughter all of these worshipers from one end of the temple to the other, and wiping out these worshipers. And they were only supposed to be the pure worshipers. Worshipers of Jehovah weren't supposed to be there. Only those that were fully dedicated to the worship of Baal. And they brought out the sacred pillars of the house of Baal and burned them. So all of these holy images that they had set up to worship, that represent the God of thunder and God of heaven and fertility, they burned all of those pillars. And also broke down the sacred pillars of Baal, and broke down the house of Baal, and made it a latrine to this day. Thus Jehu eradicated Baal out of Israel. So he made a complete sweep. So somebody can look like they're fully in charge, and God has forsaken the land, and he's not going to do anything for a period of time. But God does things on his time schedule. And now a day of reckoning comes, and they all fall in one day here in this judgment. And God does similar things throughout history. So never think that God isn't watching, that He's not going to uphold His servants in the end in His cause. Um, you see this picture here I found online? They turned the house of Baal in Samaria into a public bathroom. Covered it with toilets, and instead of being a place of worship, it's a place of uncleanness. In Lachish, here's the Israelite archaeologists digging up a Baal shrine in the city of Lachish, and it was a toilet built on top of the worship of Baal. So in this place, they did exactly the same thing that's talked about in the book of Kings. So it's not some outlandish made-up story. We've got archaeological evidence of this happening other places. If he really wanted to desecrate their place of worship, he did things like this. Show it's an unholy place, not a place to worship and defile the land. So this was just recently. You can see these men not that long ago that this was discovered. Once again, confirming the things that we read in the scriptures. Do you think this really eradicated all idolatry and Baal worship out of the land for good? It's he uses underhanded means and lies, and he's going to do good by doing evil, by lying to them and everything, and wipes out this particular temple and this particular threat. But it doesn't eradicate what is in other people's hearts, does it? There's a lot of people that still got a lot of pagan ideas and compromises in their heart. King isn't openly fighting it anymore. It'll come back. At least for a period of time here, publicly they get rid of it. But to really get rid of Baal worship, people have to repent. And their hearts have to be changed for it to really be eradicated. But at least outwardly, they got rid of it for a period of time. Then the kingdoms are at a low ebb. Both Israel and Judah are very weak at this period forward. You've had Judah, intermarrying with the house of Ahab. And so both kingdoms have Baal worship in it, and there are a lot of unfaithful people in both kingdoms. And as a result, in this physical kingdom of the Old Testament, God rewarded them physically with riches and blessings and power physically when they did good. And those things were taken away when they were doing evil. And that's what happens. Both kingdoms become weak, and their riches are taken away, and their land is stripped away for a period of time because of the unfaithfulness that's there in the land. It talks about the reign of Jehu in verses 29 through 36. Says, however, as for the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin, from these Jehu did not depart. Even the golden calves that were at Bethel and were at Dan. And the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in executing what was right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord and the God of Israel with all of his heart. And he did not depart from the sin of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin. So he was very enthusiastic in carrying out what God said about getting rid of the former dynasty that was there. But his heart wasn't fully devoted to doing what God wanted to do when it came to everyday religion and following what the law of Moses taught and making sure that he got rid of the false worship Jeroboam put in. That wasn't politically expedient for him to do that. Why? Remember when it was put in the first place, they didn't want people thinking about going back to the kings down in Judah. So he doesn't eradicate that. So he carries out the will of God, and he had some personal motives mixed in there for what he did. Of course, we have a lot of politicians that will get on board for a moral crusade in one way or another because it's politically expedient for them to be on the side of some part of God's agenda or whatever, but their heart really isn't in it in their personal life or in other matters, just because it helps them in their own situation, they are going to help you out. So that's sort of Jehu. He wasn't completely on board. But because he started off doing what God told him to do in the beginning, he's told that his family will stay to the fourth generation. So you're going to have 4 sons that will sit on the throne. And so long, over 100 years, this dynasty lasts. He'll reign for 28 years. Another of his sons will reign 41 years. So they stretch over a long period of time. And eventually they go from this low state and kind of hit a high water mark right before everything falls apart and the kingdom comes to an end. But 4 generations. It says, in those days the Lord began to cut off portions from Israel, and Hazael defeated them throughout the territory of Israel from the Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, and the Gadites, and the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the valley of the Arnon, even to Gilead and Bashan. So you can see because they continue to worship the golden calf and they have that false priesthood in Israel, and they haven't repented of that original sin of false religion that Jeroboam had put in. The Hazael and the Arameans, or the Syrians, according to which Bible translation you're using, they take all of this territory that's on the east side of the Jordan River that belonged to the tribe of Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh. They took all of that territory away from them. They weren't ever able to get across the Jordan and invade that part of Israel and take it over. So they're very powerful during this period of time, and Judah is also very weak. See, they have lost all of the territory. They had these countries down here subject to them before in the days of Solomon. Now all of that is gone too. Eventually, the Assyrians are going to rise to power, and they're going to weaken the Arameans later, and Israel will be able to flourish again for a period of time. Here is an interesting find that we said. Now it says, now the rest of the acts of Jehu and all that he did and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So they don't tell us anything else that went on during his reign. They've told us the spiritual lessons that God wanted preserved for us through the mouth of the prophets have been revealed. Here is the black obelisk that belongs to Shalmaneser III, the ruler of Assyria that we were talking about. It's the great superpower that's up above Aramea. And during this period of time, there were many of these countries that paid tribute. And this obelisk, it's in the British Museum. It's 6 feet, 6 inches tall, so it's taller than me. It's tall. And on it shows all of the different gifts and things and animals and that all of these different subject little kingdoms sent and brought to Israel. Here is Jehu bowing down to the king of Assyria. So we got a drawing of Jehu right there on that obelisk. And he's bringing gifts. So it shows that he was a weak king and he had to pay tribute. And he went in before this ruler in order to not have them come down and invade the land, be on his side in international conflicts and so on. So you don't have pictures of many Israelite kings, do we? But here's one. This awful, humiliating picture of him bowing down on his knees in front of the king of Assyria. It's interesting that on the obelisk it says Jehu, son of Omri. Well, Omri is the family Ahab came from. So it shows just because something's written on one of these pillars, it's not more accurate than the Bible. They got that wrong when they carved that on there. He had killed that whole family. He's a completely different, he's the next dynasty, but they didn't know that evidently when they made that obelisk. They didn't understand the history of Israel as well as it's described in the book of 2 Kings. So if you're a liberal scholar, a lot of times they'll believe anything that some pagan writer says above the Bible. It shouldn't be that way. But many times you do see a cooperation between the two that help give us some more insight into things. Here's a drawing of that same picture or that same carving there. Maybe you can see a little bit better where they're bringing their different gifts. The Israelites have those hats on. The king is bowing down. Different kinds of treasures and gifts and oils and things that are being presented to the king of Assyria. And Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, became king in his place. Now the time which Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. So he's the second longest reigning king of Israel. Any other thoughts on Jehu that anybody wants to add or questions you've got? Then you have the reign of Athaliah. Switch back to the southern kingdom. What happened? We're going to see the end of Ahab's descendants down there in Judah. For a period of time, they have a place of rule, and the house of David is almost wiped out, or at least the ruling part of the family that has some claim to the throne. That part of David's family is almost wiped out. And we're told about the turmoil that happened. Ahaziah had been, you remember, was killed. So it says when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she rose and destroyed all the royal offspring. So here Jehu is destroying her family up there in Israel. And now she takes revenge on the house of David, starts wiping out the royal family there, so that as the queen mother, she can rule. Think about that, how weak the kingdom of Judah is, that she's able to destroy these royal children of the house of David and seize the throne for herself for 7 years. You have a woman ruling, the daughter of Jezebel, who's on the throne in Judah. And she builds and supports Baal worship over the worship of Jehovah in the city of Jerusalem, and tries to get rid of the worship of Jehovah. So you have the same. She's trying to do the same thing in Judah that her mother did up there in Israel. So she really is the Jezebel of the South. Comes to power, and how ruthless is she in trying to eliminate? Can you imagine what it'd be like if you were a believer in Judah and you believe in all the promises to the house of David, and the Messiah is going to come through David's family, and now this woman has seized the throne, killed all the royal children? Like, where's Jehovah? Where's the Lord? Wouldn't that be a test of your faith? How's this going to be settled? But they don't know. You know, sometimes we don't know the whole story. You have to have a shield of faith. When those fiery arrows of the devil are coming at you to try to get you to doubt the truth, and you have to hang in there until God's plan becomes clear. And one of the children is saved. They don't know about that. One of the children of David is saved. That's going to be able to retake the throne. So it says Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and placed him and his nurse in the bedroom. So they hid him from Athaliah, and he was not put to death. She is married to the high priest. That's something. She's the Ahaziah's sister, but she's married into the priestly family, the high priest's wife. So she worships Jehovah. She doesn't go with Jezebel's part of the family. She's worshiping Jehovah, and she is able to save one of the royal children, heir to the throne, and is able to hide him in the bedroom. We're told by scholars the word bedroom there is talking about the room at the temple where they would store the bedding, different kinds of bedding materials. So she hides him away. And because of her connection to the high priest, I guess she's not put to death. She has a special position. So he was hidden with her in the house of the Lord 6 years while Athaliah was reigning over the land. So for 6 years, you're under this wicked woman. We're not given all the details. Josephus gives us the history that was handed down among the Jews about all the persecution of the priests and how she was trying to establish the worship of Baal and trying to eliminate the influence of the priests and of the temple and the worship of God and substitute this paganism. And we're not given the details here in the scriptures, but it must have been a horrible 6 years for this woman to be in charge and all of the persecution that was going on. And all of the people, that always want to get close to those in power and go along with them. How much of that was going on? Compromisers. But Jehoshabeath, the king's daughter, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him. This is in Second Chronicles, so a little bit different spelling of her name there. What again? You have sometimes, since it only deals with the southern kingdom, Second Chronicles, it'll give you more details than you'll get in Second Kings. It's always good to look at the parallel places. And were being put to death and placed him and his nurse in the bedroom. So Jehoshabeath, the daughter of King Jehoram, the wife of Jehoiada, here's where I found that out. It's in Chronicles. She's the wife of Jehoiada, the priest. He's the high priest. For she was the sister of Ahaziah, hid him from Athaliah, so that she death. And he was hidden with them in the house of God 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. And so he's being instructed, this little boy, by the high priest. The high priest, one of the great men in the history of Israel, or the history of Judah, for that way. He lives to be 130 years old. And while he is the high priest, he's able to instruct him not to worship Baal, worship Jehovah, follow the law, and has a great influence as long as he lives. But he dies before his reign's over and things go bad. But during the time that that high priest is alive, Joash, or Jehoash, is a good king. So Jehoiada, after the 6 years is over, he gets 5 captains of the royal guard. I guess when the strategic time comes, to be able to bring the king's son out and put him on the throne and get rid of this usurper from the throne, that he gets together with the royal guards at the temple. Now, in the 7th year of Jehoiada, sent and brought the captains of hundreds and the Karites. This seems to be those soldiers that came originally from the Philistines that were special bodyguards of King David and Solomon. That group, especially, the Secret Service or whatever, they're especially dedicated to the king. They're going to find out the king's son is alive, so they're going to be ready to work to defend the king when they find out he's alive. And brought them to him in the house of the Lord. And then he made a covenant with them and put them under oath in the house of the Lord and showed them the king's son. Isn't that a dramatic? They bring him in the temple, and here is the royal son that's been preserved these 6 years. They all, I'm sure, were ready to bow down to him and to make a covenant, to defend him with their lives. And now you got this bodyguard that's ready to help the king. And he commanded them, saying, "This is the thing that you shall do. 1/3 of you who come in on the Sabbath and keep watch over the king's house. 1/3 also shall be at the gate, sure, and 1/3 at the gate behind the guards, and shall keep watch over the house for defense. And 2 parts of you, even all who go out on the Sabbath, shall also keep watch over the house of the Lord for the king. And then you shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hands. And whoever comes within the ranks shall be put to death. And be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in." So he divides up these troops and puts them in strategic places around the capital in order to bring off this, I guess, not really a coup to put the real king back on the throne, but they're going to get rid of this usurper at the proper time. They have everybody strategically located. And so the captains of hundreds did according to all that Jehoiada, the priest, commanded. And each one of them took his men who were to come in on the Sabbath with those who were to go out on the Sabbath. So it's like usually you'd have two shifts, but all of them show up on this strategic day. So you got twice as many soldiers there, or guards, that are able to help carry this out. So ordinarily one group would relieve the other, but they all come this day. They were to come in on the Sabbath, and those who were to go out on the Sabbath and came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest gave to the captains of hundreds spears and shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. Ordinarily, they didn't have weapons, so that Athaliah wouldn't have to worry about it. But David, all of those years before, had stored weapons inside the temple. And they're able to go into that vault, wherever they're at, and get these weapons out and hand them out to the guards, and now they're all armed. So Athaliah wouldn't be expecting that these guards would be armed. So King David from the grave is really defending his family. Even though he's been dead all of these years and he served his generation, Paul said, he actually has served a lot of us since, and he served his own family by storing those weapons in the temple, so that they had something to defend themselves with and to safeguard his family. I don't know when he dedicated them there or placed them there, if he had any idea how they'd be used, but they certainly came in handy on this day. And the guards stood each with his weapons in his hand, from the right side of the house to the left side of the house, by the altar and by the house and around the king. And then he brought the king's son out and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. That's the 5 books of the law of Moses. When we studied the book of Deuteronomy, you remember the king was to have a copy of the law, and he was to keep that law. He was to read it. And here a copy of the law is given to the king's son. He's supposed to live by that law. That's what he's there for. And so they make a covenant there. And they made him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." So they're having a special high day there, a feast day on the Sabbath. And you got all of these soldiers that are armed. And the king is brought out. And everybody hails him as being the king. And we know that they had gone through the land, the Levites, and gathered the elders of the land were there on that day as well to give their support to the king. So he's got the full backing of the whole country when he brings out the king's son and has him crowned there in front of everybody. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people in the house of the Lord, and she looked, and behold, the king was standing by the pillar, according to the custom, with the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew trumpets. And then Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, "Treason! Treason!" So she comes in, she's not expecting there to be any kind of problem. What is this shouting and all of this noise? And she walks right into the trap, being in the middle of all of these armed men that are supporting the king. He's standing right next to the pillar, those 2 big pillars that are in front of the temple. He's standing next to one of those. Evidently, when they would anoint a new king, that was the place that they would stand before the people in the temple court, and people would hail them as the new king. So the people of the land are also there, the people that own land and that are in control of the land. So all of the nobles, I guess you could say, of the clans of Judah are there praising him. So she's sunk. There's nobody going to be on her side now. And isn't it something she says, "Treason, treason." She's the one that committed treason, right? By killing the royal children and taking over the throne. But now she's turned things around. I'm the one now that treason. Yeah. You just, how many times is this the story of tyrants and evildoers? This is how it always ends up at the end. What happened to Mussolini at the end? Yeah, killed. People were mocking him, mocking his body and stuff. Same thing. Hitler, what happened to him? It says, and Jehoiada, the priest, commanded the captains of the hundreds who were appointed over the army, and said to them, bring her out between the ranks, and whoever follows her put to death with the sword. For the priest said, let her not be put to death in the house of the Lord. Let's don't pollute the temple with her blood. Drag her out. They don't get far out of the temple before they dispatch her. And so they seized her, and when she arrived at the horses' entrance of the king's house, she was put to death there. So here's the end of Jezebel and her family. We got rid of them up there in Israel. Now the last one down in Judah is wiped out. And you get rid of this evil woman. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, and that they should be the Lord's people also between the king and the people. Well, isn't that the way it should have always been since Mount Sinai? They made a covenant with God at Mount Sinai. We'll be your people, and God said he would be their God. But over and over it has to be renewed, that covenant. So Jehoiada tries to do again a covenant between the people and the king. The king's going to do his duty. People will do their duty, but they'll all be faithful to Jehovah God, serve him. So a great renewal of the covenant is made. So you have the enthronement then of another descendant of David. God's promise is preserved. He would preserve the house of David until the Messiah comes through that family. So God has done what he promised. And all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down. His altars and his images they broke in pieces thoroughly, and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altar. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. So we don't know all the details unless you read Josiah's secular history about these things. But here is that house of Baal that he said they were trying to push on everybody. As soon as they got the king back in charge, they go and tear down that temple of Baal in Jerusalem and destroy it and kill the priest that's over it. Don't you know, for 6 years he must have had a really good time being Athaliah's right-hand man and everything, but now she's gone. And they come and kill him and kill all the people associated with him there and tear down that temple. Then in 2 Chronicles we have this note. Moreover, Jehoiada placed the officers of the house of the Lord under the authority of the Levitical priests, whom David had assigned over the house of the Lord, to offer the burnt offerings of the Lord, as it is written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and singing according to the order of David. Doesn't it sort of sound like the temple worship had been disrupted, that maybe what Josiah has handed down to us? They had to reappoint people to do the sacrifices and things, as it was back in the days of David. And he took the captains of the hundreds and the Kerethites, or Kerites, and the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guards to the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. And so all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death with the sword at the king's house. So sometimes to have peace, there's some people who have got to be taken out, right? These troublemakers, the troublers of Judah, she's been removed. Now they got peace. The king's back on the throne. Any other thoughts on this whole Athaliah situation, her rule and removal? Right, so he gets at the right time in the right place to be able to carry out this action that God had some plan going on the whole time, but if somebody told you, you wouldn't believe it, right? Sort of that kind of another one of those things where God's got a plan and the people have no idea. what's going on until it sprung. There must have been a lot of wicked people in the land too. I mean, that go along with it. Why do people follow wicked people today that you shouldn't be following? Follow these evil policies that go on, killing an innocent life, abortion, and all that. Why would anybody go along with that? Support it. You got rulers that do it. The reign of Joash then in Judah is in chapter 11 here and through chapter 12. And say it all starts off really well when he's a little boy and he's got Jehoiada. First 23 years are great. It says Joash was 7 years old when he became king. And in the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash, so he's called Joash and Jehoash. So you got a shortened version of his name and a longer form of his name, according to which verse you read. He became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebiah of Beersheba. There's the queen mother for her, in his regard. And Jehoash did right in the sight of the Lord all his days in which Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Wouldn't it be good if you just did good in the sight of the Lord all your days, instead of as long as you were with your parents, or as long as so-and-so was an elder and you were his friend, and then he died and then you go bad? Or you go bad when your parents aren't around anymore? That's the way he is. He's faithful as long as this man of fatherly influence is there over his life. He's faithful. But once he gets removed, he starts listening to all of the contemporary nobles that are there. Goes off the rails. Then they have this repair of the temple that they attempt to carry out. The temple's fallen into disrepair. Nobody's been taking care of the buildings there that Solomon and David, put so much effort into having built. It's been neglected, and it's sort of a sad commentary on how poor the nation is and how the priesthood really can't spend the money where it's supposed to be spent that's put in this collection. Says, so Joash said to the priest, all the money of the sacred things, which is brought into the house of the Lord, in current money, both the money of each man's assessment and all of the money which any man's heart prompts him to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it for themselves, and each from his acquaintance, and they shall repair the damages of the house wherever any damage may be found. So they've got this money that you pay in. The current money, the assessment money, is what everyone pays as once in their life because their soul is redeemed from being firstborn. The Levites take their place, but you're supposed to give this money. That might be your redemption money. And then they also have free will offerings that are put into this. And the priests and the Levites would go around and ask people for money, and they would contribute. But it doesn't get spent on the building. It ends up getting spent on the priests. So they're going to have to come up with another way to do that. Well, we'll come back, Lord willing, and look at this next time and see the rest of the reign of Jehoash.